They laughed when Amanda bent down and asked if my shoes came with the donation bin. My son Caleb chuckled into his drink. Even Nicole looked away instead of stopping it. I stood there on the back patio under the string lights, feeling every crack in those secondhand soles and every ounce of disrespect in their voices. They saw an old widow in thrift store shoes, something cheap, something easy to dismiss. But as they laughed and sipped wine and talked about the future of this property like it already belonged to them, I looked down at the grass beneath their feet and felt something inside me turn cold. They had no idea they were standing on my land that night. If this opening pulled you in, take a moment to like and subscribe. And please tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged by something as small as the clothes on your back or the shoes on your feet? I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Sometimes it helps to remember we're not alone when family wounds cut the deepest. My name is Beatrice Simmons, and I have lived in the same quiet stretch of Ohio land for nearly 40 years, just outside Columbus, where the roads narrow, the neighbors wave whether they know you or not, and time doesn't rush unless you let it. People like Amanda would call it outdated. Walter used to call it ours. My husband Walter Simmons and I didn't inherit this life. We built it piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck, argument by argument, and prayer by prayer. When we first bought this land, it wasn't worth much more than the paper the deed was printed on. The house was leaning slightly to one side. The barn had a roof that groaned louder than Walter after a long shift. And the soil. People said nothing would grow here. But we stayed. Walter worked double shifts at the plant. I took on bookkeeping jobs, sometimes cleaning houses on weekends when things got tight. We didn't take vacations. We fixed things ourselves. We learned to patch, repair, stretch, and make do. Not because we had to suffer, but because we believed in building something that couldn't be taken away easily. That land became our proof. Not of wealth, but of endurance. After Walter passed, the house grew quieter in a way that no amount of television or radio could fill. Grief has a way of settling into the walls, into the floorboards, into the empty chair at the kitchen table. For a while, I thought I might leave. Start over somewhere smaller, somewhere easier. But I didn't. Because everything I was still stood on that land. I suppose that's why I never changed the way I lived. I still shop at thrift stores, not because I can't afford better, but because I don't see the sense in wasting money on things that don't last. I've found coats, barely worn dishes that tell stories, and yes, shoes that have more miles left in them than people give them credit for. Those shoes Amanda laughed at, I bought them for $6. They were clean, sturdy, and comfortable. That was enough for me. But to Caleb and Amanda, it wasn't. My son Caleb Simmons used to be the kind of boy who helped his father fix fences and stayed up late asking questions about how things worked. He wasn't always like this. Somewhere along the way after college, after his first real job after meeting Amanda, something shifted. Success, or the idea of it, became more important than substance. Amanda, on the other hand, walked into our family like she had always belonged somewhere better. She has a polished way about her. The kind of smile that looks kind from across the room but feels different when it's aimed directly at you. She speaks softly, but every word seems measured. And she notices everything, especially the things she believes don't measure up. Like me. A few years after Walter passed, Caleb and Amanda approached me about moving into the guest house on the property. They said it would be good for family, that it would help them save money while they figured out their next step. I didn't hesitate. Of course they could stay. That's what family does, isn't it? We make room. At first it felt right. There was laughter again. Noise. Movement. Emma. Their daughter brought a light into the house I hadn't felt in years. She reminded me of Caleb when he was young, curious, observant, still soft in the places the world hadn't hardened yet. But slowly, things began to change. It wasn't sudden. It never is. It started with little comments. Amanda asking if I'd ever considered updating my wardrobe. Caleb suggesting I might want to upgrade my truck because it looked a little rough. Jokes about coupons, about my habits, about how I still mended things instead of replacing them. Always said lightly, always followed by a smile. But I noticed something else too. The way Caleb began to talk about the property. At first he would say things like, "When we fix this place up," or "We could really increase the value here." I didn't think much of it. He was proud, maybe even excited. I told myself that was a good thing. Then it shifted. It wouldn't take much to turn this into something really profitable. We should think long-term about how to use this land. This could set us up for years if we do it right. Us. That word started showing up more often. Not you, not Mom, not even the family, just us. As if the lines had already been redrawn somewhere I hadn't been invited to see. I remember one afternoon standing in the kitchen while Amanda scrolled through something on her phone. She turned the screen toward Caleb and said, "Look at this, properties out here are going for double what they were 5 years ago. Imagine if we subdivided part of the back acreage." Caleb leaned in interested. "Yeah, we could really do something with that." I stood at the sink, my hands in warm soapy water, and listened. Neither of them asked me what I thought. Not then, not later. That was the moment something in me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly enough that no one else noticed. I began to listen more carefully, to the way they spoke when they thought I wasn't paying attention, to the way Amanda referred to the guest house as our place, to the way Caleb talked about future plans that somehow always included decisions already made. Nicole, my daughter, wasn't around as often. She lives a few hours away and has her own life to manage. When she did visit, she carried herself differently than Caleb, more cautious, more observant. But even she in her own way seemed to align herself with what sounded reasonable. "Mom, you should think about simplifying things," she told me once over coffee. "It's a lot to manage on your own." She didn't mean harm, I told myself. But intention doesn't always soften impact. I smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. Because something didn't feel right, and I wasn't ready to name it yet. Emma, though, she noticed. One evening after Amanda made a comment about my vintage taste in front of guests, Emma lingered behind while everyone else moved outside. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I like your shoes." I looked down at them, those same thrift store shoes, and then back at her. "They're comfortable," I said. She shrugged. "They look like they've been places." I smiled then, a real smile, because she understood something the others didn't. Value isn't always visible at first glance. That night, as I sat alone after everyone had gone to bed, I looked out across the land Walter and I had built together. The trees stood where we planted them. The fence lines followed paths we once measured by hand. The house our house still held. But something else had taken root too, not in the soil, in the people. And for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, had they already decided what this place was worth? Without ever asking who it belonged to. If you had asked me a year ago whether my own children would ever make me feel like a guest in my own home, I would have told you no without hesitation. Not because they were perfect, but because I believed, perhaps foolishly, that there were lines family simply didn't cross. I learned slowly that those lines don't disappear all at once. They fade. They blur. And then one day, you realize they were never there for everyone, only for you. The changes didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. They came wrapped in laughter and polite tones and passing comments that lingered longer than they should have. "Mom, you really don't have to live like this anymore," Caleb said one afternoon while leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through something on his phone. Like what I asked, though, I already knew. He glanced up briefly. So, frugally. You've done your time. You could enjoy things a little. I dried my hands on a towel and met his eyes. I am enjoying things. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, sure. Amanda walked in just then, perfectly put together, as always, her blouse crisp, her hair not a strand out of place. We were just saying, she added smoothly, you deserve better, Beatrice. There's no reason to keep holding on to habits that don't really serve you anymore. Habits. That's what she called the life Walter and I built. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I had learned that pushing back only made their tone sharper, their smiles thinner. It's just how I'm comfortable, I said. Amanda gave a small, polite laugh. Of course. Comfort is important. But there was something underneath her words, something that said comfort to her meant something entirely different than it did to me. Moments like that started stacking up. Little remarks, passing judgments, subtle dismissals that on their own might not have meant much. But together they built something heavier, something harder to ignore. Caleb began to comment more openly. About my truck. You ever think about trading that thing in? He asked one morning as we stood in the driveway. It's kind of dated. It runs just fine, I replied. Yeah, but it doesn't exactly scream well off. You know, I looked at him, then really looked at him, and wondered when appearance had become more important than function. When did that matter? I asked quietly. He shrugged. It just does. That answer stayed with me longer than I expected. Nicole's visits became less frequent, but when she did come by, she carried herself carefully like someone trying not to step on something fragile. One Saturday afternoon, she sat across from me at the kitchen table stirring her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. Mom, she said finally, have you thought about maybe making things easier for yourself? I set my cup down. You've said that before. She nodded. I just mean, the property, the upkeep, it's a lot. And Caleb's already here. He could take on more responsibility. There it was again. That shift. Not if. Not someday. Already. I manage just fine, I said. Nicole hesitated. I know. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I studied her face, trying to see whether this was concern or something else dressed up to look like it. Are you worried about me? I asked gently. Or about what happens to all this later? She looked down at her cup. Both. At least she was honest. But honesty doesn't always make things easier. The real turning point came at a barbecue late that summer. The kind of evening people like Amanda love. String lights across the yard, music playing softly in the background, neighbors and friends drifting in and out with drinks in their hands and easy smiles on their faces. I had spent most of the afternoon preparing food just like I always did. It gave me something to focus on, something that felt familiar. By the time everyone arrived, the backyard was full. Caleb stood near the grill laughing loudly, flipping burgers like he owned the place. Amanda moved through the guests with practiced grace, making sure everyone felt welcome, everyone except me. I stayed mostly near the edges, checking on things, refilling trays, making sure no one needed anything. That's when it happened. Amanda was standing with a small group near the patio when she looked down at my feet. Oh my goodness, she said just loud enough to draw attention. Beatrice, are those new? I paused, tray in hand. No, I said simply. She tilted her head, smiling. They look vintage. A few people chuckled. I kept my voice even. They're comfortable. Amanda laughed lightly. I'm sure they are. It's just you always find the most interesting pieces. I swear you're one thrift store away from living in a church basement. The laughter came quicker this time, louder, and it didn't stop right away. I felt it then, that familiar tightening in my chest, that quiet burn of humiliation that doesn't show on the outside unless you let it. I didn't. I set the tray down carefully as if nothing had happened and nodded once. Well, I said, everyone seems fed. Amanda waved a hand dismissively. Oh, we're just teasing. You know we love you. Love. That word felt heavier than anything else she had said, because love doesn't make you smaller to make others feel bigger. Across the yard, I caught Emma watching. She wasn't laughing. Her expression was tight, uncomfortable, like she knew something was wrong but didn't know how to fix it. That look stayed with me, more than the laughter, more than Amanda's words, because it told me someone still saw clearly. As the evening wore on, I moved further away from the center of things. Toward the back of the property near the edge where the grass met the tree line Walter and I had planted years ago, that's where I heard them. Caleb and Amanda. They were standing just beyond the porch light, their voices low, but not low enough. We could easily section off the back, Caleb was saying. The acreage alone would make it worth it. Amanda nodded. Exactly. And if we time it right, the market's still strong. We just need to get everything lined up first. And Mom, she added after a moment. Caleb exhaled. We'll figure something out. There are places she can go. Somewhere easier. For who, Amanda asked. For everyone, Caleb replied. I stood there just out of sight, my hands still, my breath slow. They weren't talking about possibilities. They were talking about plans, real ones, measured, considered, already moving forward. And in none of it was I part of the decision. I wasn't the owner. I wasn't even a voice. I was an obstacle, a problem to be solved. I stepped back quietly before they could see me, my heart steady in a way that surprised even me. The hurt was still there, but something else had taken its place. Clarity. Because in that moment I understood something I hadn't wanted to see before. This wasn't about shoes, or trucks, or habits. It was about control, and they had already decided they were going to take it. The only question left was, how far were they willing to go to get it? There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when something you've long suspected finally settles into truth. After that night behind the porch, after hearing my own son speak about my life as if it were a scheduling inconvenience, I stopped questioning whether I was imagining things. I wasn't. What I had mistaken for subtle disrespect was something far more deliberate. And for the first time since Walter passed, I realized I needed to stop remembering and start paying attention. But before I could do that, I had to go backward, back to the beginning, because nothing that was happening now made sense unless I understood exactly what Walter had put in place before he died. That memory didn't come to me all at once. It came in fragments. The smell of sawdust in the old barn, Walter's voice calling out measurements as I held the other end of a tape line, the sound of rain hitting a roof we weren't sure would hold through the winter. We were younger then, tired, often frustrated, but determined in a way that doesn't exist unless you have something real to fight for. This land wasn't an investment when we bought it. It was a risk. Nobody wanted it. The soil was stubborn, the structures worn down, and the nearest neighbors were far enough away that it felt more like isolation than privacy. But Walter saw something others didn't. It's not about what it is now, he told me the day we signed the papers. It's about what it can be if we don't give up on it. So we didn't. We stayed through the years when money was tight and every decision mattered. We fixed things ourselves when we couldn't afford to hire anyone. We learned to live without what we couldn't justify buying. There were winters when the heat barely held, summers when the workload didn't let up, moments when we argued over whether we were doing the right thing. But we never walked away. And slowly, quietly, the land changed. Trees we planted grew tall enough to cast shade. The soil softened under care and patience. The house straightened figuratively, if not perfectly literally. It became something livable then, something solid, then something we could finally call ours without hesitation. By the time Caleb and Nicole were grown, they didn't remember the hard parts. They remembered stability. They remembered a home that felt permanent. They never saw the cost. Walter did. He always did. That's why years before he got sick, he started paying closer attention to things Caleb didn't even realize he was revealing. Caleb had always been ambitious, but ambition can take different shapes. At some point, his shifted from building to acquiring. I remember one evening sitting at the kitchen table while Caleb talked about an investment opportunity that sounded too good to be true. Walter listened quietly. His hands folded, his expression calm. "Where's the risk?" he asked. Caleb shrugged. "There's always some, but it's minimal. It's a smart move." Walter nodded slowly. "Smart doesn't mean safe." Caleb rolled his eyes just slightly. "You worry too much." Walter didn't argue. But later that night, after Caleb had gone to bed, he turned to me and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "He's not afraid of losing what he didn't build," Walter said. I frowned. "He's young." Walter shook his head. "No. He's convinced things will always be there for him. That's different. I didn't know then how much that belief would matter." Years later, after a few decisions Caleb made didn't turn out the way he expected, nothing catastrophic but enough to show a pattern, Walter grew quieter about it. Not confrontational. Just watchful. And then came the illness. It moved faster than either of us were ready for. Hospitals, appointments, conversations no one ever wants to have. Through it all, Walter stayed steady in a way that both comforted and frightened me, because it meant he was preparing. One afternoon, not long before things became too difficult for him to move around easily, he asked me to sit with him in the study. There was a small wooden box on the desk, one I had seen before but never opened. "I need you to listen carefully," he said. I remember the way his voice sounded. Not weak, but deliberate. "Everything we built. It has to stay protected," he continued. "Not just from strangers, from mistakes." I didn't like where the conversation was going. "Walter, just listen, B." He rarely called me that when he was serious. "I've made some arrangements," he said. "Legal ones. Structures that make sure no one can take control of this land without you." I stared at him. "Why would anyone try?" He held my gaze. "Because someday someone might think they know better than you, or that they deserve it more." I shook my head. "Our children wouldn't. They might not mean harm." He interrupted gently. "But intention doesn't stop consequences." That sentence stayed with me, even now. He slid the wooden box toward me. "Everything you need is in here. Documents, copies, contact information." I didn't open it then. I couldn't. It felt too much like accepting something I wasn't ready to face. "I trust you," he said quietly. "More than anyone." Those were some of the last words he spoke about the land. After he passed the box, stayed where he left it. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Grief has a way of freezing time, of making everything that comes after feel like an extension of the moment you lost someone. I kept living. I kept maintaining the property. I kept doing what needed to be done. But I didn't revisit that conversation. Not fully. Until now. The morning after the barbecue, the morning after I heard Caleb and Amanda planning my future like it was a project timeline, I went up to the attic. The air was cooler there, quieter. The wooden box sat exactly where I had placed it years ago. Untouched. Waiting. I carried it downstairs, slowly setting it on the kitchen table, where Walter and I had shared so many ordinary moments. For a long time, I just looked at it. Then I opened it. Inside were neatly organized folders, legal documents, property maps, titles, notes in Walter's handwriting, and something else. Certainty. Not vague. Not implied. Clear. The land, the core acreage, the house, the access points were structured in a way that placed control firmly in my hands. Not temporarily, not loosely, decisively. Any transfer, any sale, any subdivision, none of it could happen without my direct approval. There were protections layered in carefully, thoughtfully. Walter hadn't left things to chance. He had anticipated the possibility that someone, anyone, might try to move faster than wisdom allowed, and he had made sure they couldn't. I sat there for a long time, the papers spread out in front of me, my fingers resting on signatures I hadn't thought about in years. Everything Caleb and Amanda had been talking about, every plan, every assumption, all of it rested on something that wasn't true. They didn't own this land. They never had, and unless I chose otherwise, they never would. For the first time since that night on the porch, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Something steadier, something stronger. Understanding. Because now I knew exactly what Walter had tried to protect. Not just the land, but me. And for the first time I realized I might need to protect it too, from my own family. The night of the larger gathering came just a few days after I opened Walter's box. Long enough for the shock to settle. Not long enough for the hurt to fade. Caleb had called it a celebration. Something about Amanda's cousin getting engaged, a reason to bring people together to use the space properly, as he put it. I noticed that phrasing. Use the space, not visit, not enjoy. Use. By late afternoon, the property had transformed into something that looked more like a venue than a home. Strings of warm lights stretched across the backyard. Folding tables were dressed in clean linens. There were rented chairs, a portable bar set up, even a small speaker system playing soft music that drifted across the grass. It was beautiful, and none of it felt like mine. I moved through the kitchen quietly, preparing the last of the food I had agreed to handle. Old habits don't disappear overnight. I still believed in showing up even when it wasn't appreciated. As I carried a tray outside, I caught my reflection briefly in the glass door. Simple blouse, clean slacks, and those same thrift store shoes. I paused for just a second, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew what was coming. Amanda noticed everything, and she never missed an opportunity. The guests arrived in waves, laughter, perfume, cologne, polished shoes pressing into the same ground Walter and I had once measured with worn-out boots and borrowed tools. Caleb stood near the bar, greeting people like a host who had every right to be there. Amanda floated from group to group, effortlessly charming, introducing neighbors to relatives, making sure everyone felt like they were part of something special. I stayed closer to the edges again. It was easier that way. Less noticeable. Less in the way. Emma found me first. "Grandma?" she said softly, slipping beside me as I set down another tray. "You okay?" I looked at her. really looked this time and saw something new in her expression. Concern. Not confusion like before. Awareness. "I'm fine," I said gently. "Just busy." She didn't quite believe me, but she nodded anyway. "I like your shoes," she added, almost as if it were a secret. I smiled. "You told me that already." "I meant it more this time," she said. That small moment grounded me more than anything else that evening. Then Amanda's voice cut through the air. "Beatrice!" I turned. She was standing near the center of the patio, surrounded by a small group, her cousin, a couple of neighbors, and Nicole, who had arrived earlier but hadn't said much to me yet. Amanda gestured toward me with a bright smile. "Come over here for a second," she called. Every instinct told me I didn't need to, but walking away would have created a scene, and Amanda knew that. So I stepped forward. "What is it?" I asked calmly. She looked down deliberately at my feet. "Oh, I just had to show everyone your shoes," she said, her tone light, playful, perfectly rehearsed. A few people leaned in, curious. "They're from a thrift store," she added, lowering her voice slightly as if sharing a charming little secret. "She finds the most incredible deals." A ripple of laughter moved through the group, not loud enough to call out, but enough. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest. I kept my posture straight. "They're comfortable," I said. Amanda tilted her head, smiling wider. "Of course they are. I just think it's sweet, you know. You could afford something nicer, but you stay so grounded." Grounded. Another word that sounded kind until you listened closely. Nicole gave a small, uneasy laugh, but didn't meet my eyes. Caleb, standing just behind Amanda, took a sip of his drink and said nothing. That silence was louder than anything else. I nodded once. "Well, I said not everything needs to be replaced just because it's old." Amanda laughed again. "I suppose not. Though some things are worth upgrading eventually." Her eyes flicked not at my shoes this time, but past me. Toward the house. Toward the land. The implication hung in the air. I didn't respond. There are moments when defending yourself only feeds the performance. So I stepped back, excused myself, and moved away before she could continue. But the damage was done. Not just in what she said, in how easily everyone accepted it. I spent the next hour moving through the crowd, making sure things ran smoothly, answering questions, refilling dishes, smiling when required, invisible when possible. And all the while, I listened, because now I knew what to listen for. Conversations shifted as the evening deepened. The laughter grew looser, the voices a little louder, the filters thinner. I drifted toward the back porch again, the same place I had stood a few nights earlier, and once again I heard them. Caleb, Amanda, this time joined by Nicole. "We'd have to look at the lot lines carefully," Caleb was saying, his voice low but focused. "But the back acreage alone could be divided into at least 2 parcels, maybe 3 depending on access." Amanda nodded. "And if we renovate the main house, that adds even more value." Nicole hesitated. "But what about Mom?" There was a pause. Not long, just enough to show the question wasn't unexpected. "We'll handle it," Caleb said finally. "How?" Nicole pressed. Amanda stepped in, her tone smooth. "There are plenty of retirement communities nearby, places that are easier to manage, safer." Safer for who? Nicole asked quietly. "For everyone," Caleb replied, echoing the same words I had heard before. I felt something inside me shift again, not break, settle. Because this time there was no room left for doubt. They weren't talking about possibilities. They were outlining steps. Real ones, measured, planned. Nicole spoke again, softer now. She's not going to agree to that. Caleb exhaled, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. Then we help her see that it's the best option. Amanda added, She trusts you, Nicole. If you talk to her gently, it'll be easier. Easier. That word again. Everything about their plan was built around making things easier. For themselves. I stepped back before they could see me, my heartbeat steady, my mind clearer than it had been in years. The hurt was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't even disbelief. It was understanding. They had already moved past respect, past honesty, past the idea that I was someone who deserved a say in what happened to my own life. To them, I was a problem. An obstacle between them and what they wanted. And they were willing to move me, gently if possible, forcefully if necessary. I walked back toward the house slowly, the sounds of laughter and music filling the space behind me. The lights glowed warmly across the yard. People smiled. Glasses clinked. Everything looked perfect. But I saw it differently now, not as a family gathering. As a stage, and I understood my role in it had already been written, just not by me. I stepped onto the patio again, feeling the ground solid beneath my feet. The same ground Walter and I had fought to keep. The same ground Caleb now spoke about as if it were his to divide. I looked down briefly at my shoes. Worn, simple, dismissed. Then I lifted my gaze across the yard at the people, the lights, the carefully arranged scene, and something inside me grew still. Because in that moment, one truth stood clearer than anything else. They weren't just laughing at my shoes. They were measuring how easy it would be to step over me. And for the first time, I knew I wasn't going to let them. I didn't confront them the next morning, or the morning after that. There's a kind of power in silence when it's chosen, not forced. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't reacting to what my family said or did. I was watching, listening, thinking, planning. I woke up early before the house stirred, before Caleb's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, or Amanda's coffee machine hummed to life in the guest house. The land felt different at that hour, still honest, untouched by pretense. I walked the perimeter the way Walter and I used to. Fence lines, tree rows. The slight dip near the back where the soil always held a little more moisture after rain. Every inch of it familiar earned, and every inch of it now at risk, not because they could legally take it, but because they believed they could. That belief alone was dangerous. By the third morning, I knew what I had to do. I went back to the kitchen table, opened Walter's box again, and started organizing everything. Not emotionally, methodically. Deeds, titles, survey maps, trust documents. Notes Walter had written in that careful, slightly slanted handwriting I could recognize anywhere. He had left nothing vague. Every clause had purpose. Every structure had intent. The main house, the surrounding acreage, the access easements, even the positioning of the guest house, all tied together in a way that ensured control flowed through me. Not Caleb, not anyone else. I traced one line on a survey map with my finger. The guest house. Caleb and Amanda's home. It sat on land that depended entirely on access through the portion Walter had protected most carefully, meaning they didn't just not own the property, they depended on me to even remain on it. I leaned back in my chair, slowly letting that realization settle. Not as a weapon, as clarity. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up to see Emma standing in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "You're up early," she said. "So are you," I replied. She stepped inside, her eyes moving over the papers spread across the table. "You've been doing this a lot lately," she said quietly. I studied her for a moment. Emma wasn't a child anymore, not in the way that mattered. She noticed patterns. She connected things. And more importantly, she was paying attention. "Come sit with me," I said gently. She hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "They're planning something, aren't they?" I didn't ask who she meant. "I think they are," I answered. Emma swallowed. "I heard them the other night. Mom said something about getting you to sign something before you talk to someone else." My hand stilled on the paper. "When was this?" I asked. "2 nights ago," she said. "After everyone went to bed. They thought I was asleep." I nodded slowly. That fit. It fit too well. "What else did you hear?" I asked. Emma looked down at her hands. "Dad said it would be easier if everything was already set up. That way you wouldn't have to worry about it." Easier. There it was again. I let out a slow breath. "Emma," I said carefully, "has anyone asked you to talk to me about anything like that?" She shook her head quickly. "No, but Mom told Nicole that if she talked to you, you might listen." That confirmed what I had overheard. They weren't just planning. They were coordinating. I leaned forward slightly. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Emma looked up, her eyes searching mine. "Are they trying to take the house?" There it was. The question no one else had asked directly. I chose my words carefully. "They're trying to make decisions that aren't theirs to make," I said. Emma frowned. "But it's your house." "Yes," I said simply. "And the land?" "Yes." She blinked, surprised. "All of it?" I held her gaze. "All of it." Silence filled the space between us. Not heavy, just real. Emma sat back, slowly processing. "I don't think they know that," she said, after a moment. "No," I replied. "I don't think they do either." And that was the problem. They were building plans on something they didn't understand, and if I let them keep going, they wouldn't stop until something broke. Emma glanced at the papers again. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked down at the documents, then back out the window toward the land stretching beyond the yard. "I'm going to make sure I understand everything first," I said. And then I met her eyes again. "And then I'm going to decide what needs to happen." Emma nodded slowly. She didn't push, didn't argue, just accepted that something bigger than either of us was unfolding. Before she left for school, she paused at the door. "Grandma?" "Yes, I'm on your side." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it mattered more than she probably realized. "Thank you," I said softly. After she left, the house fell quiet again. I gathered the documents, placed them neatly back into folders, and closed Walter's box. But this time, I didn't put it away. I carried it with me, because I wasn't hiding from it anymore. I spent the rest of the day making copies, organizing, creating a clear picture of what I held in my hands, not just emotionally, but legally. By evening, one thing had become undeniable. Everything Caleb and Amanda were planning, every conversation, every assumption, every quiet step forward was built on something that didn't exist. Ownership. They didn't have it. Not legally, not structurally, not even indirectly. And yet, they were moving forward as if they did. That wasn't just arrogance, it was risk. For them. For me. For everything Walter and I had built. I stood at the back window as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. The same yard where they had stood just nights before, talking about dividing it, selling it, reshaping it to fit their vision. I looked down at my hands. Steady, calm. Not the hands of someone confused. Not the hands of someone ready to be moved aside. Walter had trusted me with this. Not just the land, the responsibility. And for the first time since all of this began, I understood why. Because protecting something doesn't always mean keeping it safe from strangers. Sometimes it means standing your ground against the people who believe they deserve it more than you. I turned from the window and reached for my purse. There was one more step I needed to take. Not with Caleb, not with Amanda, not yet. With someone who could confirm what I already knew and tell me just how far they had already gone. Because if there was one thing I had learned in the past few days, it was this: I wasn't the only one who had been paying attention. And I intended to find out exactly what my family had done before they realized I was no longer standing still. I drove into Columbus the next morning with Walter's box buckled into the passenger seat like it mattered as much as a person. In a way it did. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that settles low and presses gently against your thoughts. I had driven this road hundreds of times over the years for groceries, for appointments, for small errands that made up an ordinary life. This time felt different. This time I wasn't just going somewhere. I was stepping into something. Patricia Holloway's office sat on the second floor of a brick building just off High Street. Clean, quiet, professional without trying too hard to impress. The kind of place that didn't need to prove anything. I liked that. When I stepped inside, a young receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Mrs. Simmons." "Yes," I said. "Ms. Holloway is ready for you." I followed her down a short hallway, my grip tightening slightly on the handle of the box. Patricia stood when I entered. She was in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with sharp eyes and a posture that suggested she missed very little. "Beatrice Simmons," she said, extending her hand. "I'm glad you came." "So am I," I replied. Because I was, even if I didn't fully know what I was about to hear. We sat across from each other at a large wooden desk. I placed the box between us and opened it, slowly sliding the documents toward her. "These were prepared by my husband before he passed," I said. "I need to understand exactly what they mean." Patricia didn't rush. She adjusted her glasses, pulled the first set of papers closer, and began reading. The room grew quiet except for the soft shuffle of pages turning. Minutes passed. Then more. I watched her expression carefully, not looking for comfort, but for truth. When she finally leaned back, she didn't soften her words. "That's thorough," she said. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "Thorough is good?" I asked. "It's more than good," she replied. "It's deliberate." She tapped one of the documents lightly. "Your husband didn't just draft a simple transfer structure. He built layers of protection." My hands folded in my lap. "Explain it to me," I said. Patricia nodded. "Legally speaking, the core property, the main house, the surrounding acreage, and all primary access rights are under your direct control," she began. "Not shared, not pending, not conditional." She met my eyes. "Yours." I felt something settle deeper inside me. "And the guest house?" I asked. She glanced at another page. "It sits on a portion of land that depends on access through the protected area," she said, "which means anyone living there is doing so at your discretion." My mind moved quickly through everything Caleb had said, everything he had assumed. "So Caleb and his wife," I started. "Have no ownership rights," Patricia finished calmly. "None. The word landed firmly. Clear. Unavoidable. I nodded once. And if they tried to sell part of the land, I asked. Patricia's expression shifted slightly. They can't, she said. Not legally, but what if they told someone they could? I pressed. She paused. Have they? She asked. I held her gaze. I believe they might have, I said. Patricia didn't look surprised. She leaned forward slightly, her tone sharpening. Then we're no longer talking about family misunderstanding, she said. We're talking about potential misrepresentation. The air in the room changed. I felt it. This isn't just about them being mistaken, she continued. If your son has presented himself to a third party as someone with authority over this property, authority he does not have that could have legal consequences. For him, for me, for everything tied to this land. I swallowed slowly. There was someone, I said, a man who came by the property. He asked for Caleb. He spoke like something had already been discussed. Patricia's eyes sharpened further. Did you get his name? Ethan Cole, I said. She nodded once, already processing. That gives us something, she said. Silence settled for a moment. Then she added more gently, Beatrice. How far do you think this has gone? I looked down at the documents spread across the desk, at Walter's handwriting, at the signatures, at everything that had been protected without my fully realizing it. Far enough, I said quietly. That they're making plans. Patricia studied me for a moment. Have you confronted them? She asked. No. Good, she said immediately. I blinked. Good? Yes, she replied. Because right now they're still operating under an assumption, and assumptions make people careless. She tapped the desk lightly. If you confront them too early, they'll adjust. They'll become cautious, harder to read, harder to prove. I felt my chest tighten slightly. So what do? I asked. Patricia leaned back, folding her hands. You watch, she said. You document. And you let them continue just enough to show us exactly what they're willing to do. That didn't sit easily with me. Letting it continue. Letting them believe they were getting away with something. They're my children, I said quietly. I understand that, Patricia replied, but right now they're also people making decisions that could affect your legal standing and your property. Her voice softened slightly. You don't have to stop being their mother, she said, but you do have to protect yourself. Protect yourself. Walter's words echoed in my mind, not just from strangers, from mistakes. I nodded slowly. What should I be looking for? I asked. Anything Patricia said? Conversations, documents, emails, evidence that they've represented themselves as decision makers, evidence that they're trying to pressure you into signing something. She paused. And Beatrice? If they do bring you documents, don't sign anything. I won't, I said firmly. She gave a small nod. Good. We spent the next hour going through everything in detail. Every clause, every boundary, every protection Walter had put in place. By the time we were done, I didn't just understand the structure. I understood the intent behind it. Walter hadn't been paranoid. He had been prepared for a moment when anyone might try to move faster than wisdom allowed. As I gathered the papers back into the box, Patricia spoke again. There's one more thing you should consider, she said. I looked up. If your son has already engaged with someone like this Ethan Cole, she continued, there's a good chance this isn't just talk anymore. There may already be preliminary discussions, maybe even informal agreements. My stomach tightened slightly, which means I asked, which means she said carefully, "You may not just be dealing with a family issue. You may be dealing with outside expectations built on false authority." That made everything heavier, more complicated, more urgent. I closed the lid of the box slowly. "When the time comes, I said I want to address this in a way that makes everything clear." Patricia nodded. "And you will," she said, "but timing matters." I stood adjusting my coat. "Thank you," I said. She met my gaze. "You're not powerless here, Beatrice," she said, "not even close." For the first time since this began, I believed that completely. As I walked back out to my car, the gray sky had begun to lift slightly. Not clear, but lighter. I placed the box back in the passenger seat and sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. They had laughed at my shoes. They had planned my future. They had spoken about my life like it was theirs to reorganize. But now, I knew exactly where I stood. And more importantly, I knew exactly where they didn't. I started the engine and pulled onto the road, my mind steady, my path clear, because whatever came next, I wouldn't be caught off guard. Not again. After meeting Patricia Holloway, I didn't feel lighter. I felt sharper. There's a difference. Relief softens you. Clarity hardens something just enough to stand firm. I drove back from Columbus with the radio off Walter's box, resting beside me like a quiet witness. Patricia's words stayed with me not as comfort, but as instruction. Watch. Document. Wait. That last one was the hardest. Because everything in me wanted to walk through the door, look Caleb in the eye, and ask him one simple question. What exactly do you think you're doing? But Patricia was right. If I spoke too soon, I would lose the only advantage I had. Their certainty. People who believe they're right, who believe they're in control, don't hide as carefully. They talk, they reveal, they make moves without checking whether the ground beneath them is solid. And right now, Caleb was standing on something he thought was his. I intended to let him show me just how far he'd go. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it always had. Quiet. Still. Familiar. But I saw it differently now. Not as a place filled with memories, as a place under quiet pressure. Amanda's car was parked near the guest house. Caleb's truck sat beside it. The curtains in their windows were drawn, but I could hear faint movement inside, voices, footsteps, the ordinary sounds of a life being lived as if nothing had changed. I carried Walter's box inside and set it on the kitchen table. Not hidden, not tucked away, visible. A reminder to myself. Emma was already home from school. She sat at the counter, her homework spread out in front of her, a pencil tucked behind her ear, the way I used to do without thinking. She looked up when I entered. "You went somewhere," she said. "I did," I replied, hanging my coat. She studied my face carefully. "You look different," she added. I smiled faintly. Different how Emma shrugged. "Like you figured something out." I considered that. "I did," I said. She closed her notebook slowly. "Is it bad?" she asked. I walked over and sat across from her. "It's serious," I said honestly, "but it's not bad for me." Her brow furrowed slightly. "What about for them?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was I didn't know yet. "Depends on what they do next," I said finally. Emma nodded, absorbing that. She didn't press further. She didn't need to. Later that evening, I was in the backyard checking the fence line when I noticed a car slowing near the edge of the property, not one I recognized. It didn't stop at first, just rolled slowly along the road like someone trying to get a better look. Then it circled back. This time it turned into the driveway. I straightened, watching carefully. The man who stepped out wasn't from around here. You can tell. Not just by clothes, though his pressed jacket and polished shoes didn't quite match the dirt road, but by the way he looked at things, measuring, assessing, calculating. He walked toward the house with a kind of quiet confidence, a folder tucked under his arm. I stepped forward before he could knock. "Can I help you?" I asked. He paused, surprised to see me instead of whoever he expected. Yes," he said, recovering quickly. "I'm looking for Caleb Simmons." "Of course you are. He's not available right now," I replied. "Can I take a message?" The man hesitated, then offered a polite smile. "I'm Ethan Cole," he said. "We've been in discussions about the property." There it was. Not vague. Not speculative. Discussions. I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of discussions?" I asked. Ethan glanced toward the guest house briefly, then back at me. "Potential development opportunities," he said carefully. "Nothing finalized, of course. Just preliminary evaluations. Preliminary evaluations. Words that sounded harmless until you understood what they implied. "And you've been speaking with Caleb about this?" I asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "He mentioned the land had strong potential for subdivision, especially with the current market conditions." "Of course he did." I nodded slowly as if this were all new information. "And you believe he has the authority to make those decisions?" I asked. Ethan's smile faltered just slightly. "Well," he said, choosing his words, he presented himself as someone closely involved in the property's future. Closely involved. Not quite ownership, but close enough to blur lines. I took a small step closer. "This land," I said evenly, "belongs to me." Ethan blinked. Not dramatically, just enough. "I see," he said. "Do you—" Then perhaps he added carefully, "We should arrange a time to speak more formally." There it was. Adjustment, recalculation. But it came too late, because he had already revealed what I needed. "We can do that," I said calmly. "But for now, I'd prefer you not make any further assumptions based on conversations that may not have been fully accurate." Ethan nodded, his posture shifting. "Understood," he said. He handed me his card. "Please reach out when you're ready." I took it. "I will." He left shortly after, his car disappearing down the same road he had come from, but the air didn't settle the way it usually did after someone drove off. It stayed charged, because now I knew. Not suspected, not guessed. Knew. Caleb hadn't just been talking. He had been moving, setting things in motion, building expectations, and those expectations had reached beyond our family. I stood there for a long moment, Ethan's card between my fingers, the weight of everything pressing in all at once. Then I turned and walked back toward the house. Inside, Caleb was standing in the kitchen, his phone in his hand. He looked up as I entered. "Hey," he said casually. "You see someone pull up just now?" I met his eyes. "Yes," I said. "Who was it?" he asked. There was something in his voice. Not concern. Alertness. I stepped past him, setting my purse down. "Someone looking for you," I said. Caleb's posture shifted slightly. "Oh," he said. Who I turned to face him fully. "Ethan Cole," I said. The name landed exactly the way I expected it to. Not with surprise, with recognition, but also with something else. Tension. "Oh," Caleb said too quickly. "Yeah. He's just a guy I talked to. Nothing serious." Nothing serious. I nodded slowly. Interesting, I said. Caleb frowned slightly. Why I held his gaze? Because he didn't seem to think it was nothing, I replied. A beat of silence passed between us. Then Caleb forced a small laugh. Mom, you're reading too much into it, he said. It's just exploring options. Options. That word again. Always options. Never permission. I see, I said quietly. And I did. More clearly than ever. Because in that moment, I wasn't looking at my son the way I used to. I wasn't seeing the boy who helped his father build fences. I was seeing a man who had already stepped across a line he didn't even recognize. And the worst part, he still believed he was standing on solid ground. I turned away before he could say anything else, because I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. Patricia was right. Let them show you who they are. And Caleb had just shown me more than he realized. That night I sat alone on the back porch, the same place where everything had started to unravel. The lights were off this time. No laughter, no music, just the quiet hum of the night and the steady weight of truth settling into place. I looked down at my shoes, still worn, still simple, still mine. Then I lifted my gaze to the land stretching out in front of me, the same land Caleb had already begun to divide in his mind. The same land others were now circling, drawn in by promises that weren't his to make. And for the first time since this began, I felt something stronger than hurt, stronger than anger, resolve. Because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Not just disrespect, not just entitlement, but a plan already in motion. And if I didn't step in, it wouldn't stop on its own. I leaned back in my chair, the night air cool against my skin, and let the silence settle around me. Tomorrow, nothing would look different. Caleb would act like everything was normal. Amanda would smile that same practiced smile. Nicole would avoid looking too closely at what was happening, but I would know. And soon, they would too. The next few days moved like nothing had changed. That was the strangest part. Caleb still left early in the morning, coffee and hand keys jangling like routine could keep everything steady. Amanda still moved through the house with that careful grace of hers, checking details, adjusting things that didn't quite need adjusting. Nicole called once, her voice too casual, too rehearsed, like she was trying to keep a conversation on safe ground. And I let it all happen, just like Patricia said. I watched, I listened, and I waited. Then Caleb announced the dinner. Saturday night, he said, leaning against the kitchen counter like he was sharing good news. Just family. We should all sit down and talk about some things. Some things. I nodded slowly. What kind of things? He smiled. Future stuff. Nothing heavy, nothing heavy. I almost admired how easily he said it. Amanda added from behind him, It'll be nice. Just us. No distractions. No distractions. Meaning, no witnesses. Perfect. All right, I said simply. Saturday. Emma glanced at me from the table. She didn't say anything, but she understood. By the time Saturday evening came, everything was set. The table was laid out neatly, not overly formal but intentional. Plates aligned, glasses placed just right. Amanda had cooked part of the meal. I had prepared the rest. Nicole arrived just before we sat down, her smile polite but tight around the edges. Caleb poured drinks. Amanda lit a candle in the center of the table like this was some kind of peaceful family moment, and for a brief second, it almost looked like one. We sat. Plates were passed. Small talk filled the space. Work, weather, Emma's school, all of it carefully chosen to delay what we all knew was coming. Then Caleb cleared his throat. There it was. I've been thinking a lot about the future, he said, leaning forward slightly. About what makes the most sense for all of us. I took a slow sip of water. Go on, I said. Amanda smiled faintly as if encouraging him. Caleb nodded. This property, he continued, has a lot of potential. More than we're really using right now. Potential. Always that word. We've talked about it before he went on. But I think it's time we seriously consider making some changes. Nicole shifted slightly in her seat. Amanda placed a hand lightly on Caleb's arm, a silent signal to continue. What kind of changes, I asked, my voice even. Caleb didn't hesitate. Subdivision, he said. Renovation. Maybe even bringing in some outside investment. We could increase the value significantly. There it was again. And how would that work? I asked. He leaned back slightly confident. We'd divide part of the back acreage into separate parcels, sell those, use the capital to upgrade the main house, maybe build something new on part of the land, Amanda added smoothly. It's a smart move, Beatrice. The market is strong right now. It would be a waste not to take advantage of it. A waste? I nodded slowly. And where do I fit into this plan, I asked. Caleb smiled as if he had been waiting for that question. That's actually something we've thought about, he said. Of course you have. We want you to be comfortable, Amanda added quickly. That's the most important thing. Comfortable. Managing a property like this, Caleb continued. It's a lot. And you've done it for years. You deserve something easier. Easier? There are some really nice retirement communities nearby, Amanda said gently. Places where everything is taken care of. Maintenance, security, even social activities. Nicole finally spoke, her voice quieter. It wouldn't be a bad thing, Mom, she said. Just less responsibility. Less responsibility. Less control. Less presence. I set my glass down carefully. And this would happen when I asked. Caleb shrugged slightly. Sooner rather than later, he said. While the market is still in our favor. Our favor. And the proceeds, I asked. Amanda answered this time. We'd keep everything within the family, of course, she said. It benefits all of us. All of us. Nicole looked down at her plate. That told me everything I needed to know. You've discussed this already, I said. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't deny it. We've explored the idea, he said. Nothing final. Just planning ahead. Planning ahead. Without me, and you expect me to agree to this? I asked. Caleb leaned forward again, his tone shifting just slightly. We expect you to see that it makes sense, he said. It's practical. Practical. Amanda nodded. It's about the long term, Beatrice, not just the present. Nicole added softly. We're thinking about what's best. I looked at each of them, one by one, Caleb certain composed, convinced he was offering something reasonable. Amanda polished, persuasive, carefully shaping every word. Nicole uneasy, conflicted, but still sitting on their side of the table. Emma silent, watching everything. Waiting. I let the silence stretch, long enough that it became uncomfortable, long enough that Caleb shifted slightly in his seat. Then I spoke. Who gave you permission to sell land that doesn't belong to you? The words landed clean, sharp, no raised voice, no anger, just truth. The effect was immediate. Caleb blinked. Amanda's smile froze. Nicole looked up, her eyes widening slightly. What Caleb said. I held his gaze. You've made plans, I continued calmly, spoken to people, discussed subdivision, investment. His expression hardened. We're talking about possibilities, he said. That's all. No, I said quietly. You're talking like decisions have already been made. Amanda stepped in, her tone still controlled but tighter now. Beatrice, we're just trying to have a conversation, she said. There's no need to make this confrontational. Confrontational? I almost smiled. I'm not the one making decisions without the person who owns the land, I replied. That did it. Caleb leaned forward, his voice rising slightly. Mom, eventually, this is all going to be mine anyway, he said. So why are we acting like I don't have a say? There it was, not hidden, not softened. The assumption, the entitlement. I met his eyes steadily. You have a voice, I said, not authority. Amanda let out a small breath, clearly frustrated now. This isn't about authority, she said. It's about what makes sense for the family. For the family, I repeated. Nicole finally spoke again, her voice quieter than before. Mom, we're not trying to take anything from you, she said. I looked at her. Then why does it feel like you already have, I asked. She didn't answer. The silence returned, but it felt different now, heavier, cracked open. Caleb pushed his chair back slightly. This doesn't have to be difficult, he said. We're trying to help you. Help. That word again. I nodded slowly. I'm sure you believe that, I said. Amanda crossed her arms lightly. What does that mean? She asked. It meant everything, but I didn't explain. Not yet. Instead, I folded my hands on the table. Before we go any further, I said, my voice steady, there's something you should all understand. Caleb frowned slightly. What, he asked. I looked at him, then at Amanda, then at Nicole, and finally at Emma. Then I spoke. You've been making plans based on something that isn't true. The room went still. What are you talking about? Caleb said. I held his gaze. The ownership of this land, I said. Amanda's expression tightened. Beatrice, no, I said softly, cutting her off. Not loud, but final. You've all assumed something, I continued, and you've built your plans on it. Caleb's jaw clenched. Then say it, he said. What are we missing? I leaned back slightly in my chair, and for the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to stop holding back. You don't own this land, I said. Silence. Deep. Complete. Unavoidable. And this time, no one laughed. For a moment after I said it, no one moved. Not Caleb, not Amanda, not even Nicole. The candle in the center of the table flickered softly, the only thing in the room that seemed unaffected by the shift. You don't own this land. The words didn't echo. They settled. Heavy. Final. Caleb let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Mom, he said, shaking his head slightly. That's not funny. I'm not joking, I replied. Amanda's expression tightened, her voice still controlled but edged now. Beatrice. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, she said. No one is saying we own it right now, but... You're acting like you do? I cut in quietly. That stopped her. Caleb leaned forward, his tone sharpening. Eventually, this is mine, he said. That's how this works. I met his eyes. That's how you think it works, I said. The difference mattered. Nicole shifted in her seat, her fingers curling around the edge of her napkin. "Mom," she said carefully, "what are you trying to say?" I took a breath. Not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted every word to land exactly where it needed to. "I'm saying I began that every plan you've made, every conversation you've had, every assumption you've built your future on is wrong." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting," he said. "We're just talking about practical steps." "No," I said calmly. "You've already moved past talking." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly. "What does that mean?" she asked. I reached for the folder I had placed beside my chair before dinner. Slowly, deliberately. Their attention followed the movement. "I met with an attorney," I said. Caleb's expression flickered just for a second. There it was. Recognition. Amanda straightened. "An attorney." She repeated. "Yes," I said. Nicole looked between us, her unease growing. Why, she asked. "Because I needed to understand exactly what I said." Caleb scoffed lightly. "Mom, you don't need a lawyer to tell you that I do." I interrupted, my voice still, even when my own son starts making decisions without me. That hit harder than I expected. Caleb's expression darkened. "I'm not making decisions," he said. "I'm planning for the future." "You're presenting yourself as someone who has authority," I replied. Amanda leaned forward. "We've done nothing wrong," she said firmly. "We're trying to move things in a direction that benefits everyone." "Everyone," I repeated. I opened the folder. The sound of paper sliding against paper filled the silence. Then I placed the documents on the table between us. "Then let's talk about what actually exists," I said. Caleb didn't reach for them. Amanda did. She scanned the first page quickly, her confidence holding for about 3 seconds. Then it slipped. Not dramatically, but enough. Her posture shifted. "What is this?" she asked. "Legal documentation," I said. "Prepared by Walter before he passed." Caleb frowned, finally leaning forward. "What kind of documentation?" he asked. "The kind that defines ownership," I said. Nicole leaned closer, her eyes moving over the pages. Caleb picked one up, scanning it quickly. Then again, slower this time. His brow furrowed. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "It does," I replied. "You just never asked." Amanda's voice came out sharper now. "Beatrice, this is just paperwork. That doesn't change the fact that this is family property." "It is family property," I said calmly. Her eyes flashed with relief too soon. "Under my control." The relief vanished. Caleb looked up at me. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I said, "that the house, the land, the access, everything you've been talking about is legally structured in a way that gives me full authority." He stared at me. "That's not possible," he said. "It is," I replied. Amanda shook her head. There must be some kind of shared interest, some transfer structure, something that... "There isn't," I said. Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that settles into your bones. Nicole's voice came out small. "So, we can't sell anything?" she asked. "No," I said. Caleb pushed back from the table slightly, his frustration rising. "This is ridiculous," he said. "There's no way Dad would set it up like that." I held his gaze. "He did," I said. Why, Caleb demanded. There it was. The question he should have asked years ago, because he understood something you didn't. I said quietly. Caleb scoffed. "And what's that?" he asked. That building something I said and inheriting something are not the same. The words hit. Amanda stood abruptly. "This is unbelievable," she said. "We've been living here, contributing, maintaining." "Living here," I said with my permission. Her mouth opened slightly, closed. Caleb stood as well now, his voice louder. "So what, you're just going to hold this over us?" he asked. "You're going to act like we don't matter?" "That's not what I said," I replied. "It's exactly what you're saying," he shot back. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "What I'm saying is that you don't get to decide what happens here without me." Amanda crossed her arms tightly. "This is about control," she said. "Yes," I replied. The word hung in the air. Unapologetic, because it was true. Nicole looked between us, her voice trembling slightly. "Mom." "What happens now?" she asked. I looked at her, then at Caleb, then at Amanda, and finally at Emma, who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but had seen everything. "That depends," I said. "On what?" Caleb demanded. "On what you do next," I replied. He laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means I said that what you've already done may have consequences." Amanda stiffened. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I held her gaze. "You've spoken to people," I said, "about this land, about plans, about development." Caleb's expression shifted again. "You don't know that," he said. "I do," I replied. How he challenged. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. The silence did it for me. Amanda's eyes widened slightly. "You spoke to someone," she said. "Yes," I said. Caleb's voice dropped, more cautious now. "Who?" he asked. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "Enough to know," I said, "that you've been presenting something you don't have." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't finalized," he said quickly. "Nothing was signed." "That's not the point," I replied. Amanda stepped forward slightly. "This is being blown out of proportion," she said. "We were exploring options." "That's all?" "Options," I repeated. Nicole looked like she might cry. Emma looked like she finally understood everything. And Caleb looked like a man realizing for the first time that the ground beneath him wasn't as solid as he thought. I folded my hands in front of me. "You've all been standing on something," I said quietly. Their attention snapped back to me. "And you never once asked who it belonged to," I continued. No one spoke. No one argued. Because there was nothing left to argue with. The truth was already there, spread out on the table, impossible to ignore. I stood slowly, not in anger, not in triumph, just in certainty. "This conversation isn't over," I said, and it wasn't, not even close. Because what came next wouldn't just decide what happened to the land, it would decide what was left of this family. The house didn't go quiet after that dinner. It fractured. Not all at once. Not with shouting or doors slamming, though there was some of that later. No. The first break was quieter. A shift in how people moved around each other. How they avoided eye contact. How they chose their words more carefully or didn't choose them at all. Caleb didn't speak to me the rest of the night. Amanda did once. "This isn't over, Beatrice," she said in a low voice as she cleared plates that didn't need clearing. "I know," I replied. She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, then turned away. Nicole left early. She hugged Emma. She didn't hug me. But as she walked past, Her hand brushed mine lightly, almost by accident, and she whispered, "I didn't know." I believed her. That didn't make it easier. The next morning, the tension had settled into something colder, controlled, measured. Caleb sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, not really working, just present. Amanda moved between rooms with purpose, as if staying busy could keep something from unraveling further. I poured my coffee the way I always did. Steady. Unhurried. Mom, Caleb said, finally, not looking up. "Yes," I answered. He exhaled slowly, then closed his laptop. "I think you're being influenced," he said. There it was. Not an apology. A pivot. Influenced by who I asked. By that attorney, he said, finally meeting my eyes. "You don't understand all the legal stuff. She's probably making it sound worse than it is." I took a sip of coffee. "I understand it just fine," I said. He shook his head. "No, you don't," he insisted. You're overcomplicating things." Amanda stepped into the kitchen just then, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "She's not overcomplicating," Amanda said calmly. "She's being overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. I set my cup down. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said. Amanda gave a soft, sympathetic smile. "It's okay if you are," she said. "There's nothing wrong with needing help. Help. Always help." "I don't need help," I replied. Caleb leaned forward slightly, his tone sharpening. "Mom, listen," he said. "We're trying to make this easier for you. But if you keep pushing back like this, it's going to get messy." Messy. That word sat heavier than he intended. Messy for who, I asked. "For everyone," he said. Amanda nodded in agreement. "We don't want things to get complicated legally," she added. "That wouldn't be good for anyone." Legally? There it was. They were circling it now, testing the edges. I studied them both carefully. "Are you suggesting something I asked?" Caleb hesitated just for a second. Then he said, "I'm suggesting that maybe you should have someone else look at things too. A second opinion." Amanda stepped closer. "Someone neutral," she said. "Someone who can make sure everything is being handled appropriately." Appropriately. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Recognition. "You mean someone who will agree with you," I said. Caleb frowned. "No," he said quickly. "That's not what I mean." But it was. We all knew it. Amanda's tone shifted slightly, still polite but firmer. "We just want to make sure you're making decisions with a clear understanding," she said. "And you don't think I am?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. "That's what we're trying to determine," she said instead. There it was. The line. Not crossed loudly, but crossed. I leaned back in my chair. "And if I don't agree?" I asked. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then we have to consider what's best," he said. "For who?" I pressed. "For you," he replied. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. Walter's words echoed again in my mind, not just from strangers, from mistakes. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was strategy. They weren't arguing about the land. They were shifting the argument to me, my judgment, my capacity, my right to decide. Amanda spoke again more gently now. "Beatrice, you've done so much for this family," she said. "No one is denying that. But there comes a time when things change. Things change." I held her gaze. "They have," I said. She nodded as if we were agreeing. Exactly, she said. And we need to adjust accordingly. Adjust, reposition, reframe. Words that all meant the same thing. Move me. Emma's voice came from the doorway. No, you don't. We all turned. She stood there, her backpack still over one shoulder, her expression tighter than I had ever seen it. Amanda said, her tone warning. What Emma shot back. You think I don't hear you? Go to your room, Caleb said sharply. No, she said. The word surprised all of us. Even her. You don't get to talk about Grandma like that, she continued, her voice shaking slightly but holding. Like she doesn't know what she's doing. Amanda stepped forward. This is not your place. It is my place, Emma interrupted. I live here too. The room went still. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. This isn't helping, he muttered. Emma looked at me. Tell them, she said. I met her eyes. There was no fear there, just certainty. I don't need to tell them anything, I said quietly, because they already knew. They just didn't want to accept it. Amanda's composure slipped just slightly. This is getting out of hand, she said. We're trying to have a reasonable conversation, and suddenly we're being accused of what manipulation. Caleb didn't deny it. He just looked at me. Harder now. What exactly do you think we're doing? He asked. I held his gaze. You're trying to take control of something you don't have the right to control, I said. His expression hardened. That's not true, he said. It is, I replied. Amanda crossed her arms. You're making this into something it's not, she said. And you're trying to make it into something it is, I answered. Silence. Then Caleb said it. The thing I had been waiting for. We're worried about you, he said. There it was. Not anger, not frustration, concern. Packaged neatly, carefully, strategically. Worried about what I asked. He hesitated, then said, Your ability to manage everything. The words landed exactly where he intended, but they didn't do what he expected, because I had already seen it coming. Amanda stepped in quickly. It's not a criticism, she said. It's just realistic. Realistic. I nodded slowly. I see, I said. And I did. Completely. They weren't just trying to convince me anymore. They were building something. A narrative. One where I wasn't capable. One where my decisions could be questioned, challenged, overridden. I stood slowly. The chair scraped softly against the floor. That's enough for now, I said. Caleb frowned. No, it's not, he said. We need to. We will, I interrupted. Not loud, but firm. Amanda watched me carefully. This isn't going away, she said. I know, I replied. Emma stepped closer to me. Caleb looked between us, something unsettled flickering in his expression. Good, let it. Because now everything was out in the open. Not the full truth yet, but enough. Enough to see the shape of what they were building. And more importantly, enough to know exactly how far they were willing to go. I turned and walked toward the back door, stepping outside into the quiet of the yard. The air felt different, heavier, but clearer. Because now I understood something I hadn't fully accepted before. This wasn't just about land, or money, or plans. It was about control. And they weren't going to stop at asking. They were preparing to take it, even if it meant taking something else first. My voice, my judgment, my right to stand where I was. I looked out across the property, the lines of it sharp in my mind, now not just as memory, but as fact. Protected, defined, mine. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't just feel ready. I felt certain. Because whatever they were building, I was already ahead of it. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, but because everything had finally come into focus. There's a point in any conflict where confusion disappears, where you stop asking why and start asking what now. I had reached that point. Caleb and Amanda had shown their hand. Not completely, but enough. They weren't just pushing for control of the land anymore. They were preparing to question my ability to control anything at all. And that changed everything. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I called Patricia Holloway before breakfast. "I think they're moving in that direction," I said without preamble. "Toward capacity?" she asked. "Yes." She didn't sound surprised. "Then we move faster," she said. "Tell me everything." I did. The conversation at the table, the language they used, the shift from persuasion to implication. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "That's enough to take seriously." "What do we need?" I asked. "Documentation," she said. "Anything that shows intent. Conversations, messages, evidence that they're trying to influence or pressure you." I thought of Emma, of what she had already told me. "There may be more," I said. "Then we get it," Patricia replied. I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Not relief. Momentum. The house was quiet when I stepped into the kitchen. Caleb had already left. Amanda's car was gone too. Emma sat at the table, her laptop open, though she wasn't typing. She looked up as I entered. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did you," I replied. She gave a small shrug. "I heard them again," she said. I paused. "When last night?" she said. "After you went outside?" My chest tightened slightly. "What did they say?" Emma hesitated. Not because she didn't want to tell me, because she was choosing her words carefully. "Dad said things were getting complicated," she said. "That you weren't cooperating." I let that sit. "And your mother?" I asked. Emma looked down briefly. She said maybe it was time to bring in someone who could evaluate you, she said. There it was. Clear. Unmistakable. I exhaled slowly. "Did they say anything else?" I asked. Emma nodded. "They were arguing," she said. "Mom said if things got delayed, it could mess up everything they've been working on." Working on. Not planning. Working on. "And Dad?" I asked. "He said they just needed to get ahead of it," Emma replied. "Before you changed anything. Before I changed anything. Before I secured what was already mine. Before I stopped them." Emma reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "I have something," she said. My heart slowed. "Show me," I said. She unlocked the phone, hesitated for just a second, then tapped a file. Voices filled the room. Caleb's. Amanda's. Low. Urgent. "We need to move faster," Caleb was saying. "If she talks to someone else," "She already has," Amanda interrupted. "Then we get ahead of it," Caleb replied. "We make it clear she's not thinking straight." My stomach tightened, but I didn't react. Not outwardly. We can't just say that Amanda said. There has to be a reason. There is. Caleb snapped. "Look at what she's doing. Holding on to everything, refusing to listen." "That's not enough," Amanda said. "We need something more solid." A pause. "Then, we get Nicole involved," Amanda continued. If she backs us, it looks like concern, not control. Silence. Then Caleb again. Fine, he said. But we need to do it soon, before she changes anything legally. The recording ended. The kitchen felt colder, not because of what they said, because of how calmly they said it. I looked at Emma. You recorded this, I asked. She nodded. I didn't know if I should, she said quietly, but it didn't feel right. I reached across the table and took her hand. You did the right thing, I said, and she had, more than she probably understood, because that recording, it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof, clear, direct, damaging. I called Patricia again within the hour. I have something, I said. Good, she replied. Come in. Emma insisted on coming with me. I want to be there, she said. I didn't argue. Some truths are easier to face when you're not alone. Patricia listened to the recording twice. The first time her expression didn't change. The second time she leaned back slowly. That's significant, she said. How significant, I asked. She looked at me directly. It shows intent, she said. Clear intent to question your capacity as a means to gain control. Emma shifted beside me. Is that illegal? She asked. Patricia considered. It depends on how far they take it, she said. But it's certainly something we can use. I felt a weight lift. Not because this was easy, but because the truth was finally visible. What about Nicole? I asked. Patricia's expression softened slightly. She's a factor, she said. If she supports them, it strengthens their narrative. I nodded. I need to talk to her, I said. Patricia didn't stop me, but she did say, be careful. That evening I called Nicole. She didn't answer right away, but she called back. Mom, she said, her voice cautious. Can you come by? I asked. A pause. Then, okay. She arrived just after sunset. No Amanda, no Caleb, just her. She stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside like she wasn't sure what kind of conversation she was walking into. Sit, I said gently. She did. I didn't ease into it. I didn't soften it. I placed Emma's phone on the table and pressed play. Nicole listened. Every word, every pause, every piece of it. By the end, her face had gone pale. I didn't know it was like that, she said. I believed her. But belief doesn't erase involvement. They're asking you to support this, I said. She looked down. I didn't think it was wrong, she admitted. I thought it was just about helping you. Helping. I shook my head slightly. It's not help if it takes something from me, I said. She swallowed. I didn't realize how far they were going, she said. I leaned forward slightly. Now you do, I said. Silence filled the space between us. Then I asked the question that mattered most. Nicole, which side are you on? She looked up at me, torn, afraid, honest. I don't want to lose you, she said. That wasn't an answer. Not yet. But it was the beginning of one. And sometimes, that's where everything changes. Nicole didn't answer me right away. She sat there, her hands clasped together in her lap, her eyes fixed on the table like she was trying to find something written there that could tell her what to do. I don't want to lose you, she had said. It wasn't enough, but it wasn't nothing either. Not wanting to lose me, I said quietly, and standing with me are not the same thing. Her eyes lifted slowly. I know, she whispered. The room felt smaller in that moment. Not physically, emotionally. because everything was narrowing down to one simple truth. Choices. You've been part of this, I continued. Maybe not the way Caleb and Amanda have, but you've been there. You've listened. You've gone along with it. Nicole flinched slightly. I thought, she started, then stopped. What did you think I asked? She swallowed. I thought it was practical, she admitted. Selling part of the land. Making things easier. I didn't think, she shook her head. I didn't think they were trying to push you out. I held her gaze, and now I asked. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Now I know they are, she said. Silence stretched between us again. Then I asked the question one more time. Which side are you on? This time she didn't hesitate as long. But when she answered, her voice trembled. Yours, she said. The word hung there. Fragile, but real. I nodded slowly. Then you're going to have to stand up, I said. Not just feel bad. Not just understand. Stand up. Nicole wiped at her eyes quickly. I will, she said. I promise. Promises are easy. Proof is harder. We'll see, I replied. She nodded, accepting that. That night I called Patricia. She's with me, I said. For now, Patricia replied. I know, I said. Then we use that, she said. We move forward. We move. What does that look like? I asked. It looks like we bring everything into the open, she said. No more quiet conversations. No more assumptions. We set a formal meeting. With them, I asked. Yes, she said. And anyone else who needs to be there. I knew what she meant. Ethan Cole. Let them explain themselves, Patricia continued. In front of everyone, with evidence on the table. I felt a slow, steady sense of readiness settle in. All right, I said. We set the time for 2 days later. A meeting. Not a family dinner. Not a conversation in the kitchen. Something official. Something that couldn't be brushed aside. When Caleb found out, his reaction was immediate. What is this? He demanded, standing in the doorway of the living room, his phone still in his hand. A meeting. With a lawyer. Yes, I said simply. This is ridiculous, he snapped. We don't need lawyers to talk about family matters. We do, I replied, when family matters become legal ones. Amanda stepped in behind him, her expression tight. You're escalating this, she said. There's no reason to make it public. Public, I repeated. You've already involved outside parties. Her jaw tightened. That's not the same thing she said. It is now, I replied. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. What exactly do you think is going to happen at this meeting? He asked. The truth, I said. He let out a short laugh. You think you're going to scare us into backing down? He said. I met his eyes. No, I said. I think you're going to explain yourself. Amanda crossed her arms. We've done nothing wrong, she said. Then you have nothing to worry about, I replied. That didn't comfort her. I could see it. Because for the first time since this began, they weren't in control of the situation. The day of the meeting came quickly. We didn't hold it at the house. Patricia insisted on neutral ground. Her office? Controlled. Structured. Caleb arrived first, his posture rigid, his expression set. Amanda followed, composed but clearly tense. Nicole came in quietly, her eyes avoiding Caleb's. Emma stayed close to me. And then Ethan Cole walked in. That shifted everything. Caleb's head snapped toward him. What is he doing here? He demanded. Ethan didn't answer. He looked at me. at Patricia, then at the documents already laid out on the table. Patricia stood. "Let's begin," she said. "No small talk. No easing in. Just start." "Mr. Simmons," she said, looking directly at Caleb. "You've been in discussions regarding potential development of property located under Mrs. Beatrice Simmons's ownership. Is that correct?" Caleb stiffened. "We've talked about possibilities," he said. "Possibilities you represented yourself as having authority over," Patricia replied. "That's not what I said," Caleb shot back. Ethan spoke then. "Carefully. You indicated you were in a position to move forward with certain decisions," he said. Caleb turned toward him. "I said I was involved," he said. "You implied control," Ethan replied. The distinction mattered, and everyone in the room knew it. Patricia slid a document across the table. "Let's clarify something," she said. "This property legally belongs to Mrs. Simmons. All decision-making authority rests with her." Ethan nodded slightly. "I understand that now," he said. "Now, not before," Patricia continued. "Any representation otherwise," she said, "could be considered a misrepresentation of authority." The room went still. Caleb's expression hardened. "This is being twisted," he said. "We were exploring options. That's all." Patricia didn't raise her voice. "Then let's explore something else," she said. She pressed a button on her phone. Emma's recording filled the room. Caleb's voice. Amanda's voice. Clear. Unfiltered. "We need to move faster. Before she changes anything, we make it clear she's not thinking straight." No one moved. No one spoke. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. Nicole closed her eyes briefly. Amanda's face had lost all color. Caleb stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might break. Patricia spoke again. "This," she said, "is not exploration." She let the words sit, then added, "This is intent." Caleb finally snapped. "This is insane," he said. "You're taking a private conversation and turning it into something it's not." "What is it then?" Patricia asked calmly. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Amanda tried. "We were concerned," she said. "We were talking about what to do if what Patricia asked." Amanda hesitated, then said it. If Beatrice wasn't capable of making sound decisions. There it was, out loud, no longer implied, no longer hidden, just said. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see someone polished. I saw someone desperate and afraid. Nicole spoke then, her voice shaking but clear. "That's not true," she said. All eyes turned to her. "You knew what you were doing," she continued, looking at Caleb and Amanda. "You weren't worried about her. You were worried about losing control." Caleb stared at her. "Nicole." "No," she said. "I heard it. I saw it. And I went along with it." Her voice broke slightly, but I was wrong. Silence followed. Not empty. Final. Because now everything was out. No more pretending. No more framing. No more hiding behind words like help or practical or easier. Just truth. Raw. Unavoidable. And standing in the middle of it was me. No one spoke for several seconds after Nicole's words settled into the room. It wasn't the kind of silence that waits for someone to respond. It was the kind that closes in. Heavy. Final. Uncomfortable in a way that forces truth to stay exactly where it is. Caleb looked at Nicole like he didn't recognize her. "Are you serious right now?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Nicole didn't back down. Yes, she said. Amanda's composure cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. This is unbelievable, she said under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Patricia didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been placed on the table. Documents, voices, intent, all of it. And there was nowhere left for Caleb or Amanda to hide. Caleb leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly like he was trying to regain control of something that had already slipped through his hands. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said finally. "All of it." No one responded, because even he didn't sound convinced. Amanda straightened, pulling herself back together. "We made a mistake," she said carefully. "Fine. We should have included you more in the conversation, but that doesn't mean we were trying to do anything malicious." Malicious. Another word meant to soften something that wasn't soft. I watched her closely. "You were trying to move me out of my own home," I said. Her eyes flickered. "That's not what we said," she replied. "It's exactly what you said," I answered. Caleb slammed his hand lightly against the table. "We were trying to figure out what's best," he snapped. "You're making it sound like we're criminals," Patricia spoke, then her tone even. "No one is calling you criminals," she said, "but actions have consequences." Caleb turned toward her. "You're the one pushing this," he said, filling her head with... She didn't need help understanding. Patricia interrupted. She needed confirmation. That landed, because it was true. I didn't look at Caleb. I didn't need to. I already knew what I would see. Frustration, denial, and something deeper, fear. Ethan cleared his throat slightly. "I think it's important to clarify my position," he said. "I was approached under the impression that there was authority to proceed with preliminary discussions. Now that I understand that isn't the case, I will not be moving forward." Caleb turned toward him sharply. "You're just backing out," he said. Ethan held his gaze. "I'm stepping away from a situation that wasn't presented accurately," he replied. There it was. Another piece falling into place. Another door closing. Amanda's voice came out tight. "So that's it," she said. "You're just going to walk away." Ethan nodded once. Yes. No hesitation. No negotiation. Just done. The room felt smaller again. But this time it wasn't just pressure. It was consequence. Patricia gathered a few of the documents together, aligning them neatly. Given what's been presented, she said there are a few immediate steps that need to happen. Caleb let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, here we go," he muttered. She ignored him. First, she continued any and all discussions regarding the property with third parties need to stop immediately. Ethan gave a small nod. "That's already handled," he said. Second, Patricia went on. "There needs to be a clear understanding of boundaries moving forward." She looked directly at Caleb and Amanda. "This includes occupancy," she said. Amanda stiffened. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Patricia said calmly, "that your presence on the property is contingent on Mrs. Simmons's permission." The words hit harder than anything else had. Because they weren't emotional. They were structural. Real. Caleb's face darkened. "You're saying we can just be kicked out," he said. "I'm saying," Patricia replied, "that you are not entitled to remain if the relationship has been compromised to this extent." Amanda stood abruptly. "This is insane," she said. "We've been living there. Contributing. Building. Building what I asked quietly." She turned toward me. "A future," she said. For who? I asked. She didn't answer. Because now she couldn't. Caleb pushed his chair back, standing as well. So that's it, he said. You're just going to throw us out. I stood slowly, not in reaction, in decision. I'm not throwing you out, I said. He scoffed. That's exactly what you're doing, he shot back. No, I said. What I'm doing is setting boundaries. The word hung there, heavy, unavoidable. Amanda's voice dropped sharper now. This is about control, she said again. Yes, I replied. And this time, I didn't soften it, because I wasn't going to pretend any more. This is about control, I continued. Mine. Silence. Then Caleb laughed, but it was hollow. You always cared more about this land than anything else, he said. Even us. That hit. Not because it was true, because it was what he believed. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man he had become. And for the first time, I didn't try to correct him. You think that's what this is? I asked. He shrugged. Isn't it? He said. I took a step forward. No, I said quietly. This is about respect. He didn't respond. This land, I continued, is something your father and I built from nothing. We sacrificed for it. We protected it. Not because it was worth money, but because it represented something real. Amanda rolled her eyes slightly. Here we go, she muttered. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Caleb. I didn't hold on to this for myself, I said. I held on to it so you would have something stable, something secure. He shook his head. That's not how it feels, he said. No, I agreed, because you never saw what it cost. That landed, harder than anything else. Emma shifted beside me, her presence steady. Nicole stood quietly across the room, her face pale but resolute. And instead of asking, I continued, instead of understanding, you decided it would be easier to take control than to earn it. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's not what we did, he said. It is, I replied. Amanda stepped forward again. We were trying to move forward, she said. You're the one holding everything back. I finally turned to her. No, I said. I'm the one holding everything together. Silence. Because that was the truth none of them wanted to face. If I let go, everything would fall. Not just the land, the illusion, the structure, the version of the future they had already claimed. Caleb looked at me one last time, and in his eyes I saw it. Not regret, not yet, just the raw, uncomfortable realization that he had misjudged me. Completely. This isn't over, he said. No, I replied. It isn't. Because what came next wouldn't just decide where they lived. It would decide what kind of family we were going to be if we were going to be one at all. And standing there in that room with everything finally exposed, I understood something clearly. The land was never the hardest thing to protect. The truth was, the drive home was quiet. No one said much. Emma sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed out the window as the road stretched ahead. Nicole followed in her own car. Caleb and Amanda left separately, not waiting, not looking back. The air felt different when I pulled into the driveway, not lighter, but settled. Like a storm had passed, not without damage, but with everything finally visible in its wake. I stepped out of the car, slowly looking across the land the way I had done so many times before. the same trees, the same fence line, the same house. But nothing felt the same, because now everything had been spoken, and once truth is spoken, you can't fold it back into silence. That evening, Caleb came to the house alone. No Amanda, no anger in his steps this time, just something heavier. He stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside.
"Can we talk?"
he asked. I nodded. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where so many ordinary moments had passed over the years. This didn't feel ordinary. Caleb rubbed his hands together, then rested them flat on the surface. "I didn't think it would go like that," he said. I didn't respond. I thought... He paused, searching. I thought I was doing something smart. Something that made sense. "For you," I said. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he admitted. Silence stretched between us. Then he looked up. "You really weren't going to tell us?" he asked. "Tell you what I said, that you had full control over everything," he replied. I studied him. "You never asked," I said. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "I just assumed." He started. "I know," I said. That was the problem. Assumption. Not understanding. Not respect. Just expectation. Caleb leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting. "I thought it would all be mine eventually anyway," he said. "Eventually isn't the same as now," I replied. He looked down. I see that he said, quietly, "That was new. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just acknowledgement. It didn't fix anything, but it mattered." "What happens now?" he asked. I considered that, not as a reaction, as a decision. "You and Amanda will need to move out of the guest house," I said. He nodded once, like he had already expected it. "Okay," he said. No argument. No pushback. That more than anything told me something had shifted. Not completely, but enough. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I continued. "I'm doing it because boundaries matter." He didn't argue. "I understand," he said. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he spoke again. "I didn't think you'd fight back like this," he admitted. I almost smiled. "I wasn't fighting," I said. He looked up. "It felt like it," he said. I shook my head. "I was protecting something," I replied. "Your land," he said. "No," I said. He frowned. "Then what?" he asked. I held his gaze. Myself. That landed, deeper than anything else, because that was what this had really been about. Not property, not money, respect. Caleb swallowed his throat tight. "I didn't see it like that," he said. "I know," I replied. And I did. That was part of the problem. Nicole came by the next day. Aeon. She stood on the porch for a moment before knocking like she was asking permission without saying it. I opened the door before she could. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside slowly. "I meant what I said," she told me. "I know," I replied. She looked around the house, her expression softer now. "I don't know how to fix everything," she admitted. "You don't have to fix everything," I said. "You just have to stop being part of what's breaking it." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I'm trying," she said. That was enough. For now. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Not overnight, not easily. Caleb and Amanda moved out of the guest house. There were tense moments, quiet ones, conversations that didn't go anywhere, and some that went further than I expected. Amanda never apologized. Not directly. but her silence spoke for her. Caleb came around more often than I thought he would. Not to argue, to sit, to talk, to understand in pieces what he had missed. Nicole called more, visited more. Not as someone entitled to something, but as someone trying to rebuild something she had almost lost. And Emma stayed close, closer than ever. She helped me around the property sometimes, asked questions Walter used to answer, listened in a way that told me she was learning not just about land, but about what it meant, about what it cost. I made a decision not long after everything settled. I met with Patricia again. "I don't want this to happen again," I said. "It won't," she replied. "Not if you structure it properly." So we did. We reinforced everything Walter had put in place. Stronger, clearer, not just legally protected, but intentionally directed. The land would stay, not divided, not sold off for convenience. Parts of it would be used for something meaningful. A community garden, perhaps, or a small scholarship fund tied to the town, something that reflected what it had always been. Not profit, purpose. And the rest would go to those who understood that, not assumed it, not demanded it, earned it. One afternoon, weeks later, I stood in my bedroom holding 2 pairs of shoes. The thrift store pair. Worn, simple, still holding shape after everything. And a new pair. Clean, well made. Bought not out of need, but out of choice. I placed the new ones on the floor, and then carefully, I set the old ones back in the closet. Not hidden, not discarded, kept. Because they weren't just shoes. They were a reminder of the night everything changed. Of the moment I stopped letting others decide what I was worth. Of the ground I stood on and the strength it took to stay there. Later that evening, I stepped outside, the sun setting slowly over the land Walter and I had built together. The air was quiet, peaceful. Not perfect, but honest. Emma joined me, standing beside me without saying anything. We watched the light fade together. "Do you think everything's going to be okay?" she asked after a while. I thought about that. About Caleb, about Nicole, about everything that had broken and everything that was still trying to heal. "I think it can be," I said. She nodded, then glanced down at my feet. "New shoes?" she asked. I smiled. "Yes," I said. She looked back out at the land. "They're nice," she said. "They are," I agreed. Then I added softly, "But they don't mean as much." Emma looked at me understanding. And for the first time in a long while, so did I. "Before you go, I want to share something with you. Sometimes the world teaches us to measure people by what we can see: their clothes, their homes, the things they choose to spend money on. But what we don't see is often where the real value lives: sacrifice, discipline, quiet strength. I was judged for wearing thrift store shoes, laughed at for being less than. But those same people didn't see the years behind those choices, the work, the loss, the decisions made to build something lasting. Greed doesn't always look like greed. Sometimes it sounds like practicality, like concern, like what's best for everyone. But real care doesn't take control. Real love doesn't erase your voice. And sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is set a boundary with the people you thought would never cross one. So I want to ask you, have you ever been judged by something small? Something on the surface while everything meaningful about you was ignored? And what would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if stories like this about family dignity and standing your ground mean something to you, I hope you'll subscribe and stay with me. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now, because no matter where you are, you're not alone.